Do you really believe that slavery is over? That it stayed in the past with chains, ships, and whipping posts? Well, that's the biggest lie we've ever been told. The truth is something else, much more uncomfortable, much more current. Slavery is still alive, pulsing in the heart of cities, disguising itself as work, as debt, as opportunity. It hasn't disappeared. It just got smarter, quieter, and much more cruel. In this video, you'll discover how millions of people are still trapped, without handcuffs, but without freedom. You'll understand why the system still profits from human suffering, and how all of this might be happening around you, or even inside your own home. And more, you'll learn what you can do right now to avoid being complicit, neither through your silence nor through your consumption. Get ready, because once you see what's behind the curtain, you'll never look at the world the same way again. And maybe, for that very reason, you'll become part of the change so many people are waiting for. There are still people who think slavery is a thing of the past, the kind we see in history books, with shackles on feet and slave ships crossing the Atlantic. But the truth is that today, in the 21st century, more than 50 million people are living in modern slavery. That's right, 50 million. Only now the chains are invisible. They're called fear, debt, hunger, misinformation, and silence. Modern slavery is a ghost disguised as opportunity. In many parts of the world, workers are deceived by promises of decent jobs, and when they get there, it's hell. Workdays of up to 18 hours, no pay, no rest, no rights. And we're not just talking about poor countries. This happens right in Europe, in the United States, in Brazil, in the neighborhood next door, maybe in the house across the street. There are children who should be playing or learning to read, but instead they're sewing clothes in dimly lit basements. There are women who cross continents chasing a dream and end up sexually exploited. There are men who spend years in sugarcane fields or charcoal camps without seeing their families, living in inhumane accommodations, unaware that they even have rights. Slave labor exists, and it has a face, a name, a story, and it's almost always ignored. And the scariest part, many times these victims don't even know they're in slavery. They've been convinced that this is normal, that there's no way out, that it's better than nothing. This is institutional slavery, a system that convinces people they should be grateful for their own exploitation. It's cruel, it's perverse, but it's real, and it happens every single day. Debt bondage is another modern shackle. A person accepts an advance to travel or buy work tools and never manages to repay it. The amount grows, the interest eats away at their soul, and the debtor spends years working just to try to escape a debt that never ends. It's the new slave quarters. Instead of iron, they use paperwork. Instead of a whipping post, they use fine print contracts. And human trafficking is still fully operational. Men, women, and children are bought and sold like merchandise. Some NGOs already call this market the most profitable slavery per human being in history. And you know what makes it even more painful? A large portion of the global population consumes products and services that are directly or indirectly tied to human exploitation, without knowing or pretending not to know. Modern slavery is silent, but it screams in every corner of the world. It's in underground factories, hidden farms, disguised beauty salons, brothels and mansions with invisible maids. There are no chains on the feet anymore, but it still traps dreams, destroys lives. And all of this leads us to one inevitable question. If it was abolished, why does it still survive? A lot of people learned in school that slavery ended with the signing of a law. Sounds nice on paper, but no one told us that when the pen marked the official end of slavery, millions of black people were thrown into the streets without land, without jobs, without compensation. Abolition was more abandonment than liberation. The slave quarters were torn down, but the system that held them up remained standing. In Brazil, the so-called Golden Law came with no inclusion plan, no land reform, no access to education, no reparations. Former slave owners received honors, pensions, and even medals. And the freed people, they became a social problem, and what happened here was no exception. In the United States, the 13th Amendment ended formal slavery, but opened the door to mass incarceration and forced labor disguised as legal punishment. And in England, the country that calls itself a pioneer in the fight against the slave trade, paid compensation. Not to the enslaved, but to the slave owners. Billions in today's values. A fortune. In other words, the whole world signed abolition laws, but no one wanted to dismantle the economic empire built on African slavery. The slave trade stopped being legal, but the profit it generated was preserved and multiplied. This false abolition shaped what we now call structural racism, because the foundations of slavery, colonialism, and exclusion were simply recycled into new formats. Where there were once chains, new laws were created to block access to land. Where there were once whips, there are now miserable wages and a total lack of opportunity. The enslaved person ceased to be property, but continued to be disposable to the system. Have you ever wondered why the poorest neighborhoods always have the same racial profile? Or why the top positions in major companies rarely include black people? That's not a coincidence. It's a legacy. A direct trace of institutional slavery that was never truly fought. Abolishing without repairing is like trying to heal a wound without cleaning the infection. It may look healed on the outside, but inside it rots. And look how the discourse is sugar-coated. They say everyone is free, but freedom never arrived equally for everyone. When the system says, now you're free, but offers no tools to live that freedom, that's just another form of imprisonment, a social prison, invisible yet suffocating. And the worst part is, many still believe that you just have to work hard, as if everyone started from the same place. So when you hear that slavery ended in 1888 or 1865 or any other date, remember, the system just changed its mask. The slave quarters became underemployment, the whip became exclusion, and the whipping post was replaced by institutional humiliation. But that's only the beginning, because the next layer is even more brutal, when poverty becomes a prison. Not every prison has bars. Sometimes it disguises itself as a job. Millions of people, every day, leave home believing they're working, when in truth they're merely surviving under inhumane conditions, sowing for pennies, harvesting for crumbs, caring for homes without pay, sleeping in stifling shacks. That's not work, that's modern slavery, with a badge. Just look at the underground factories in Latin America. Women working 16 hours a day, sewing clothes for major brands. No contracts, no rest, no voice. Or the men in cobalt mines in Africa, submerged in mud, risking their lives to extract what powers our cell phones. It's not coincidence, it's human exploitation disguised as progress. And the most perverse part? Many say, but at least they're working, right? As if simply being occupied justified any kind of abuse. Work without dignity is just another form of slavery. Invisible slavery, institutional slavery, slavery that feeds a system where a few profit and many are silently destroyed. In Southeast Asian countries, children under the age of 10 work in brick kilns, factories and rice fields. Meanwhile, in wealthy European neighborhoods, migrant women clean mansions in exchange for food and a place to sleep. And sometimes, not even that. The glamour of the first world hides modern-day slave quarters, and poverty becomes the strongest shackle of all. And here in Brazil, there are rural plantations where workers live in conditions similar to slavery, as if we were still in the 19th century. Complaints become threats, misery becomes a contract, and fear becomes the boss. It's slavery in Brazil disguised as opportunity, as a side hustle, as just helping out. But in practice, it only keeps the cycle of exploitation going. Now imagine someone agreeing to work 10 hours a day for a plate of food. It happens, way more than you think. That's the face of contemporary slavery. And what makes it even more painful is that in the minds of those people it still feels better than starving. When desperation becomes currency, the system wins. And the question remains, how long will we keep calling something work when it destroys bodies, steals youth, and erases dreams? Perhaps the scariest part is realizing this kind of slavery doesn't need chains. It disguises itself as hope. But what happens when that hope turns into a trap? That's when a new and much more sophisticated kind of shackle comes in. Debt. In the past, slaves wore chains on their wrists. Today, many wear bills. Debt slavery is one of the most silent and perverse forms of modern domination. It doesn't require an overseer or slave quarters. All it takes is an empty promise, a poorly explained contract, and that's it. The person becomes a prisoner without realizing it. And the cruelest part, the prison is inside the mind. There are workers who agree to travel to another country, convinced they'll change their lives. But once they arrive, they find out they owe for every cent spent: travel, food, uniform, even the mattress they sleep on. The amount is unpayable, and their passport is taken. The result? Years working to pay off a debt that only grows. The new slave quarters are digital, and debt is the whip. In Gulf countries, for instance, thousands of construction workers live in this cycle. They work under scorching sun on luxurious projects, but don't even have the right to go home. They're exploited by abusive contracts and often threatened if they try to escape. It's modern apartheid, a global slavery disguised as a legal agreement, and it doesn't stop there. Misinformation is as powerful a shackle as any physical chain. When a person doesn't know their rights, they accept whatever comes. When they believe they were born to suffer, they don't even try to fight back. That's how the system works, feeding ignorance, spreading fear, and offering solutions that are actually traps. How many people do you know who live in debt and think that's normal? Who take out loans to pay off other loans? Who live in the red, not understanding how they lost control? That's consumer slavery. It's a system that offers easy credit, but charges a heavy price in interest, in mental health, in freedom. And who profits from that? The same ones who always have. And some people say, well, no one forced them to sign. Really? When hunger hits, when a child cries, when there's no other option, what does choice even mean? Debt slavery doesn't start with bad faith from the victim. It starts with the exploitation of vulnerability. And this happens every single day, in all social classes, in every country, including your own neighborhood. Speaking of neighborhoods, have you ever wondered how many forms of slavery might be hiding right next to you? You don't have to go far to see it. The next chain might be just up the street. And that's exactly what leads us to the next shock. The kind of slavery that hides behind tall walls and respectable facades. Some people imagine slavery as something far away, hidden in remote forests or war-torn nations. But what if I told you it might be happening in the house on the corner, in the salon where you get your hair cut, in the restaurant where you have Sunday lunch, in the gated community next door with tall walls and a flawless appearance? Invisible slavery lives among us, and it's far more common than it seems. Domestic workers who receive no salary, sleep on the floor, and are forbidden to leave. Seamstresses exploited in tiny apartments, producing clothes for famous brands. Undocumented immigrants threatened with deportation if they demand their rights. Slavery in the 21st century wears expensive perfume, clean clothes, and hides behind silence. Sometimes even within respectable families. And the most absurd part? Many of these oppressors see themselves as generous. They say, I give them food, let them stay in my house, as if they're doing a favor. But a favor that enslaves is not kindness, it's abuse. It's institutional slavery disguised as charity. And the saddest thing is that much of society pretends not to see, because seeing would mean taking action. Did you know there are cases of people held captive in wealthy areas for decades? People who never stepped outside, who were separated from their families, who even lost their own names. This isn't fiction, it's real. And you don't have to go far to find stories like these. Because domestic slavery is silent, but it screams through the eyes of those who have lost all hope. And why does this keep happening? Because impunity reigns. Because those who should be enforcing the law pretend not to see. Because the victim is afraid to report. And often because society refuses to believe. After all, it's easier to imagine evil in a distant villain than to admit the oppressor might be wearing a suit and going to church every Sunday. These forms of invisible slavery are hard to fight because they blend into daily life. They're in the small details, in the excuses, in the informal agreements. And the truth is, as long as there's silence, the oppressor will keep living next door, free, unbothered, and smiling. This is not exaggeration, it's the cruel portrait of today's slavery. But if up to this point you've already felt outraged, brace yourself, because the next kind of slavery is even more shocking. A form of exploitation that destroys the body, the soul, and the future, and that targets the most vulnerable, women and children. Sexual slavery is the most brutal and silent face of human exploitation. Women and children are kidnapped, groomed or deceived with false promises, and end up trapped in forced prostitution networks, without documents, without help, with no way out. They are treated like merchandise, sold from city to city, from country to country. And often, society has the audacity to blame them. Sex trafficking generates billions every year. It is one of the most profitable illegal markets in the world, second only to drug and arms trafficking. And the most shocking part is realizing who the clients are. Politicians, businessmen, men who appear to be respectable. Sexual slavery is kept alive by hypocrisy. It exists because there are those who pay, because there are those who stay silent. There are girls who leave home thinking they'll work as babysitters, sales clerks, or models. Before they realize it, they're trapped in a cycle of abuse, constantly threatened and with no chance of returning. Fear paralyzes, shame silences, and the system looks away. It's not just sexual exploitation, it's a psychological war that kills slowly, without leaving visible scars. And it's not just children in poor countries. In Europe, in the United States, in Brazil, there are women who are born, grow up, and disappear inside these networks. Young women lured in by boyfriends who later become their pimps. Teenagers seduced by promises of fame, travel, gifts, and end up chained in dark rooms. Modern-day slavery, with makeup and social media filters. Many of these victims are migrants. They flee poverty or violence and end up captured by international networks. Their documents are confiscated. Threats become part of daily life, and any attempt to escape means beatings, or worse. It's slavery through debt, through gender, through vulnerability, a cruel mix of everything humans can do at their worst. And the system keeps profiting. The brothel pays bribes, the pimp stays untouched, and the victim becomes just another statistic. Impunity feeds this cycle, and society's silence allows it to continue. When the exploitation of the body becomes routine, human dignity turns into a luxury, and those who try to report it are often dismissed, threatened, or ignored. Now you might be wondering, why doesn't anyone do anything? Why does this cycle of pain keep spinning as if it were normal? The answer, sadly, is as cruel as the problem itself. Because the system allows it, and that's exactly what we need to face in the next point. Have you ever stopped to think why something as cruel as modern slavery still exists in the 21st century? The answer is simple and brutal, because it's profitable, very profitable. We're talking about a system that generates over $150 billion a year through human exploitation. That's right, more than the GDP of many entire countries. When there's that much money involved, silence becomes currency. Corruption settles in, and those who should be monitoring look the other way. Politicians stay quiet, companies pretend they don't know, and consumers keep buying products stained with blood. It's a silent pact, an agreement between greed and omission. Modern slavery only exists because the system finds it convenient. There's also social indifference, which numbs empathy. Many people only care when it's someone close. If the pain is distant, it becomes a statistic. If it doesn't affect their comfort zone, it's not their problem. This collective apathy allows slavery to keep existing, disguised as normal. It's the old "this has always existed," as if that made it acceptable. And the media? It barely talks about it. Stories come out, get silenced, and are soon forgotten. Headlines scream for a day, but by the next, there's a new scandal that's more sellable. Sensationalism replaces commitment, and the truth gets buried under tons of distraction. After all, it's easier to sell gossip than to talk about slave labor, human trafficking, or systemic abuse. On the other hand, the system is also sustained by lack of education. When people don't know their rights, when they don't understand what exploitation is, when they don't have access to information, they become easy targets. It's like leaving the door open in a dangerous neighborhood. Crime thanks you, and modern slavery thrives where ignorance is cultivated. But there's still another factor: fear. Many know something is wrong. They feel it, they see it, but they don't report it. They don't get involved. Better stay out of it, they say. And meanwhile, lives keep getting destroyed, because the silence of those who witness is the shield of those who enslave. The system feeds on cowardice, and it grows stronger with every mouth that stays shut. Yet despite all this, not all hope is lost. There are people who refuse to accept this reality, who fight, who report, who save lives even with limited resources. And that's who we'll talk about now, because where there is pain, there can also be resistance. Even in the face of so much pain, there are those who choose not to remain silent. Amid this perverse system, voices rise in resistance. NGOs, activists, lawyers, survivors, all united by one purpose: to free those who are still trapped. They are the real, invisible heroes, working behind the scenes, facing threats and scarcity, but refusing to give up, because they know every life saved is worth the effort. Organizations like Walk Free, Free the Slaves, Reporter Brazil, among many others, are mapping, exposing, and dismantling exploitation networks. And often it starts with something simple: listening, welcoming, believing, giving voice to those who have only known silence. In shelters, support centers, and even on social media, people are making a difference every day. And the most beautiful part: many of these people were once enslaved. Survivors who are now activists, women who escaped sexual trafficking and now help others to break free, men who were forced into slave labor and now expose the schemes. They know the weight of the chain, and that's why they're committed to breaking them one by one. Support networks are also growing. Anonymous reports, inspection teams, investigative journalism, all of this helps weaken the system. But these initiatives need support, because fighting a billion-dollar system takes more than courage. It takes structure, visibility, and often the engagement of those who are watching, of those who are reading, of you, and don't think this is out of your reach. Change starts with simple actions: consuming more consciously, supporting brands that are committed to fair labor, sharing relevant information, reporting suspicious situations. Sometimes one click can be the difference between freedom and more years of suffering for someone. Your voice, no matter how small it may seem, can echo farther than you think. You can also get involved actively. There are courses, lectures, volunteer campaigns, social projects in underprivileged areas. All of this creates a shield of resistance against modern slavery. And more than anything, there's power in speaking about it, in educating, in not letting the topic be buried, because silence is the greatest ally of oppression. And now that you know all of this, the question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Ignore it, share it, act on it. Because slavery changed its name, changed its form, but it still screams. And maybe, just maybe, your voice is someone's only chance to be set free. Now that you know, what will you do with it? Will you pretend you didn't hear? Will you keep consuming as if nothing has changed? Or will you choose to be part of the transformation? Because modern slavery doesn't need a whip, it only needs our silence. And maybe your voice is exactly what's missing to break those chains. How many people do you know who need to hear this? How many might be living something similar without even knowing the name of the prison they're in? If this video touched you, share it. Send it to someone. Post it. Shout it. Don't let this message die here. Because every click can be a broken chain. Every share, a new chance for freedom. And if you want to keep learning, growing stronger, and being part of something bigger, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Here we don't close our eyes to pain, we shine a light on it. And we invite you to walk with us, so that one day, no one else will have to live chained behind a smile.